The No Fate channel. Checking in. On this episode of Dad's Home Gym, I'm going to be going over every type, every iteration of wrist straps, wrist wraps, and even gym gloves to help you decide which ones are going to be right for you, what the pros and cons are for each, what to avoid and what to look for, and frankly, what is worth your hard-earned money. Now, if this is your first time to the channel, give this video a like and hit that red subscribe button. On this series, I typically can be found reviewing pieces of home gym equipment, but hey, sometimes wrist wraps, wrist straps, and even gloves are pieces of home gym equipment that matter because it's something that you're going to be using on almost every set. So let's get into it. Your wrist is involved in almost every lifting exercise that you do in the gym. For long-time lifters, you probably have some type of wrist stress or strain that you notice constantly. For some of you, you're going to only notice wrist stress when you're doing those really heavy, awkward exercises, very much like a bench press. It is important to support your wrist. Oftentimes, we think that extra support is not the right thing to do, that it's going to inhibit our gains. But the truth is, if you've ever seen the gymnasts, with both the men and the women, the thing that they do before every event is they wrap their wrists with some serious industrial strength wrist wraps specifically made for Olympic gymnasts. So we're going to talk right off the top about wrist wraps. Wrist wraps are fairly simple but highly effective. You loop it over your thumb, wrap it around your wrist, cinch it down with Velcro, and then you have extra support for your wrist, preventing your wrist from moving in an unnatural position or putting too much strain on your wrist when you are lifting. Wrist wraps range in price from super cheap all the way to super expensive, and they all tend to fail in one of two ways. Number one, after hundreds of thousands of uses, the Velcro ends up just not being any good, and you'll find that the Velcro just won't stay stuck. And the other way that they fail is that the stretchiness, the resistance, the support that it provides over time, over a long period of time, will reduce. As you can think of a rubber band, as the rubber band gets stretched multiple times, it just doesn't have that elasticity that it had when it was brand new. So which should you do? Should you go cheap? Should you go expensive? Unfortunately, there are a ton of cheap wrist wraps out there, and because of the marketing photos and because of that price point, you tend to get pulled in. Be aware of those. Don't get fooled. You're going to be throwing those things in the trash in under a month, rest assured. I happen to think there's a number of great companies out there. One that I use regularly that I happen to think is great value for the money is Bear Grips. They've got different colors. They've got different lengths. They've got different strengths in terms of support, and I will tell you what I do and what I recommend to other people. Number one, you want to get the most extreme support that you can. So you want to get the 4-band support that they offer. Reason being is it may seem like a lot on the first few days. You're going to have a slight break-in period, and then in 2.5 to 3 years, when you're still using them, it's still going to offer you a ton of support, and it's not going to be all gone to crap. Number two, I want you to get the longest wrap that they sell. They usually have two versions. I always recommend the longest one. It's going to give you the most support, and that kind of leads back into issue number one. The more support you start off with, the more support you're going to have in 3 years, and these will last absolutely 3 years. The last pair I had that I tossed was still good, still working, but the Velcro was just starting to go after 3 years. The company is solid. I'll put links in the description if you're interested. Again, there's a lot of great companies out there, but be aware if you go cheap, you're going to regret it. Now let's talk about wrist straps. When you were doing those heavy pull downs, or you're doing those heavy deadlifts, or you're doing heavy rows, you don't want your wrist to fail before the muscle that you're targeting does. And that's why you would use wrist straps. Now, wrist straps come in a multitude of styles, shapes, colors, and prices. So let's start with the simplest and probably the most common, and that is the type that is just a simple, goes over the wrist. You wrap it around the bar and you are off to the races. People tend to love these and use them often because of the price point. They are fairly inexpensive. And even if you go cheap on these, you can get about a year plus out of these before the material gets kind of eaten up by the metal you're wrapping it around. Overall, the downside to these is the fact that when you go heavy, as I know you like to do, there's a lot of strain on your wrist and they really kind of cut into your wrist. Now, some companies will throw in a little bit of extra support to prevent the chafing and the strain that comes with these type of straps. Unfortunately, it's pretty cheap and it's just for show. As you move up the food chain in terms of price, you will find that the wrist support does improve. This is probably the next one up in terms of what I have here. These are Pro Fitness, and you can see how thick and how wider the actual support is on your wrist. So when you use these wrist straps, it is really twofold. You're getting wrist support from bending backwards, but you're also getting wrist assistance so that it's not kind of digging in and hurting you unnecessarily when you're going super heavy. Another company that I really, really love, made in America, made in Wisconsin, they've been around forever, is Chic. They make belts, they make wraps, they make straps, and they do it right. They don't cheap out on the material or the stitching. And these things feel great, and they tend to last, at least my experience, almost 2 years. The cheaper ones will last you like 6 months, but oftentimes when you're going through some heavy metal and wrapping these things time and time again, they're going to get chewed up and the fabric itself is going to get frayed. But these Chic ones I found personally to last the longest. The only slight problem with these wrist straps is that after you wind that fabric around the bar and you're done with your set, you've got to unwind that fabric. And obviously you're going to be wrapping both hands, and it does become a bit of a nuisance and a little bit of a time crunch if you're trying to move quickly. So you can upgrade to this style of wrist strap. Now, the benefit of this style is that you quickly roll it up and you're off to the races and just let your hand go and you're free and clear. This is great for you CrossFitters or people who like to do circuits, or for those of you who are just like to just move quickly from set to set and don't want to have to be barred down and deal with the whole wrap the bar, unwrap the bar. Now, obviously, these do tend to cost a bit more, but these are my preferred because you get all the benefit of that wrist support and you get a nice, great grip, but you don't get the time crunch and headache with wrapping and unwrapping. I will say they're not cheap. I have a big fan of Bear Grips. A few other companies make these. Versa Grips is another company that's well known. So if you are interested in this style, should you go cheap? Because there are a number of knockoffs out there. And I think you know the answer to that, but I want to show you. I've got these from MyProtein. Now, these things are ridiculously cheap. The only good thing about them is this material that they use does give you a fair amount of stick. But these are, they send you 2 of them, and they are made for each hand. The Bear Grips and a lot of the others are actually angled specifically for your left hand and your right hand. And you can see closely, this actually says left right here. Also, with regards to the Velcro, you can see that this Velcro is already, after a few uses, tearing out and ready to come off, and not nearly as dense and as professional as the Bear Grips. Also, the stitching are already coming out on these cheap ones, which is probably what you should expect, and not double and triple stitched like Bear Grips. Also, one of the other issues here is the actual bar that they have here. When you pull this over, it slides, and a few times when I was using this, it actually cut into my wrist during use, and I had to stop immediately because the pain was just too much. Definitely not something you want to go cheap on. If this is something that you're excited about or want to get your hands on, definitely spend the extra money because these do last. A good pair, again, 2 years plus. Even if you're going crazy on the weight and wrapping it around some really rough metal, it's not going to matter. It's still going to hold up for 2 years, so you want to invest that money. Now, there's one more style of wrist strap that I don't have here. I'll put a photo of it right up here. And professional powerlifters tend to use this style because I think it gives them the most amount of grip factor when doing it. But it seems to be very much a nuisance, and I think it's only meant to be used on the deadlift. So it's something that if you're big into deadlifting, you might want to pick up a pair of those type of wrist wraps. but I don't think the average Joe Schmo in the gym is going to find them to be beneficial in terms of their everyday lifting style. And last but not least, lifting gloves. I know you usually make fun of people wearing lifting gloves, but I wanted to go over it because it is an option. And in 2022, post-pandemic or mid-pandemic or just pandemic, depending on how you view it, it is something that more and more people are wearing. So first and foremost, I know a lot of people that do like to wear lifting gloves in general. They tend to find lifting gloves to be beneficial when they are doing a lot of functional training. So when they're doing lots of circuits and functional training and doing pushes on the sled, they're doing rope pulls, they are doing sledgehammer slams, they're flipping tires, they're moving very quickly. The benefit of the glove is that it gives you a nice, good grip, and it lets you transition very quickly, and it keeps your sweaty hands from getting in the way of your exercises. Now, these Bear Grips gloves are really designed not only to help you with your lifting, but more importantly, for those of you still working out in a local gym, to prevent all of the germs. We know what's going on in a local gym. Ain't nobody washing their hands when they use the bathroom. They're just chalking up their hands, they're grabbing weights, they're putting them back, and no one's wiping anything down. And I'm a hypochondriac, so I actually think this is beneficial if you're going to be lifting in a local gym and you're really worried about germs. You might want to pick up a pair of gloves because that's going to be the best way to remove your hands from contacting many of those surfaces and then ultimately touching your face and getting sick. I definitely think that lifting gloves is something that you might consider depending on your lifting style and location. Now, if you have any questions regarding the straps, wraps, or the gloves that we talked about, drop them in the comments below. I'm going to put links to everything we talked about in the description of today's video and give you a few options to check out in terms of straps, wraps, in terms of price points as well. Hopefully you found this video informative. If you came this far, give it a like, hit that red subscribe button. As usual, thanks for watching, and don't save anything for the trip back.